One of the questions that I get asked on a regular basis is, how in the world did our church get involved with an orphanage in the Dominican Republic? And who in the world is this Rebecca Gentry that won't stop talking about these incredible kids that live at the orphanage? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you a little bit of history between the orphanage and Foster Street and Pastor Pedro. Bear with me because it's a little bit confusing. 14 years ago, our first medical missions team based out of Asheboro went to the Dominican Republic and started working there. Dr. Todd Williams and his wife Denise joined the team 11 years ago, and then my family joined the team 8 years ago. Pastor Pedro, who's in charge of the orphanage, has always been our main contact person in the Dominican Republic. And his church, the Dominican Evangelical Church, is our home-based church family. And Pastor Pedro and Yodi, who is the director of the orphanage, coordinate everything for our medical team to serve in the Dominican Republic. For several years, Yodi was my husband's translator, and they worked together side by side for the week that we were in the Dominican Republic. It's amazing how God coordinated everything for us to work at the orphanage several years ago. But let me wait just a second because I'm getting ahead of myself. The orphanage hasn't even been built yet at this point in time. In 2010, as you know, there was a horrific earthquake that struck Haiti, and many people were killed and thousands of people were left homeless from this earthquake. And Pastor Pedro saw all the children that were homeless as a result of the earthquake, and he felt horrible for all the children. So he came together with several other Americans and Christian organizations, and the orphanage was built to serve the boys who were left homeless, and also for boys whose mothers could not afford to feed them or send them to school. In 2012, the center was built, and many of the boys who live at the orphanage have been rescued off of the streets. From the first time that I visited the orphanage, I fell head over heels in love with the boys, and I just loved them. Ever since then, since 2012, I've had an 8x10 photo up of them in my home, and I've had several pictures of individual boys up in my home, and not a week went by for years that I did not think about these boys. Before the 2017 missions trip, I got together with Denise Williams for about 6 months, and we prayed together for the Dominican Republic, but I prayed specifically for the boys who lived in the orphanage every single week for about 6 months. I prayed that they would know that I really cared about them, and I prayed that they would have a growing relationship with God and that they would know how much God loved them. And I wanted them to know that I just wasn't thinking about them 1 week a year when I went on the missions trip. And God answered my prayers in the most incredible way. In March of 2017, my husband couldn't come on the trip. And so every day I would go with the medical team, go work out in Abates with the children. And then afterwards, when they were done working, they would go back to the resort. And instead I would ride the bus back to the orphanage. And my children, Catherine and Christian, and I all hung out with the children who lived at the center until it was time to go home at 9 o'clock at night. And we had a great time with them the entire week. We had so much fun. But as the week went by, it became more and more apparent that there was a great need for food and for basic supplies at the center. And it completely broke both me and my children's hearts to see all the needs that they had. There was an incredible need for more food and for supplies, but also for someone then to call their own. As a week went by, a few of the boys came to me and asked if I would be their mother. And honestly, my first response was no, because I didn't actually say no, but in my head I was thinking, there's no way. And I'm like, what does that mean? How in the world could I be a mother to boys who live in a different country than me? And I thought about all the reasons why this would never work. And honestly, many of the reasons were very good reasons. But as I opened my mouth to say no, God told me, don't you dare say no. As the week went by, both Pastor Pedro and Yodi came to me separately and asked me if I would consider starting to come to the orphanage by myself and helping. And I honestly thought it was a crazy idea and that my husband would never agree to me coming to the Dominican Republic by myself. But I also thought about the fact that I already love these boys deeply, and if I started coming to the orphanage to become their mother, how amazing it would be, but also how incredibly painful it would be for me to love someone so dearly and yet be so far away from them, and to be able to spend, not to be with them all the time. So I came home from that missions trip, not knowing what to do. And I honestly came home and cried for about 2 days. I prayed and I seek God's will, and I was just terrified. And because I knew that if I did this, it would change my life forever. But after praying and seeking God's will, to my surprise, it was my husband who came to me, and he said, clearly, this is something that you don't necessarily want to do, but this is clearly something that God wants you to do. You need to go buy a ticket and start going back to the orphanage and serving. And one by one, every single member of my family came to me and said, you need to go and start helping at the orphanage. So with the full support of my family, I was just so thrilled and excited and both terrified to start this adventure. But most importantly, not only did I have the support of my family, I felt like God was calling me to do this. Next, I didn't know what to do. I called my church to ask for guidance. And as I called my church to talk to them, I could barely speak. I was just overwhelmed with concern for the boys and the great need that there was at the orphanage. Never in a million years did I think that my church would not just support me, but want to come and love on the boys and spend time with the boys and invest in the orphanage themselves. Since then, Foster Street has been sending money for the last 2 years for food for the orphanage, and several of the members of our church sponsor the boys. It has been incredible what has happened over the last 2 years. It's just amazing what God has done. Last July, a group from our church went and we built bunk beds for the boys. We have bought 2 ovens for the orphanage, washing machines, fans. Through our church, the boys have had mattresses and sheets and shoes given to them. There's so much to do at the orphanage still, but God is blessing and God has been doing incredible things. I'm so thankful for Foster Street and for the partnership that we share together with the orphanage and with Pastor Pedro and the Dominican Church and Yodi. And I'm so excited what God is going to continue to do. And I just want to thank you for your support and for your continued support for the boys that live at this center. So, Dios te bendiga. God bless you. Thank you.